Now you know what social psychology is, and you understand the difference between the different similar fields. Okay. Now let's think about how we came to understand the theories and understand how we talk about social psychology today. Okay. So we can approach the study of social psychology's constructs in a lot of different ways. One of these ways is behaviorism, because we're looking at human behavior, right? Now, there's going to be criticisms in each of these strategies in studying social psychology. Okay. There's going to be good things and there's going to be bad things. So looking at behaviorism, for example, behaviorism comes from like B.F. Skinner and Watson, and understanding how and why people behave a certain way. And of course, B.F. Skinner looked mostly at animal behavior. Okay. Watson, for example, was interested in human behavior. But if we want to understand a particular behavior, we would first have to understand the situation, identify what we can objectively about the social situation, and then document the behaviors that occur within that context, within that situation. And so behaviorism is this school of psychology. It's kind of very broad area looking at behavior. And behaviorism in definition is behavior, period, right? It doesn't matter if it's animal or human, but we're talking about human behavior here. And so things that we can look at in terms of behaviorism is how the environment influences how one acts. So it influences through, for example, reinforcement, through punishment, and how the environment interacts with that person's initiated behavior and how the environment initiates behavior. Okay. Kind of a fun video if you guys like the Big Bang Theory. This is an example of how you can actually condition a human to do certain things by using chocolate as a positive reinforcement. And so I think a lot of us forget that we as people are reinforced by things every single day, and that does shape our behavior and that changes how we act. And so behaviorism principles are put into different concepts, like, for example, behavioral training and techniques for example, for people with autism, for children with autism. There are treatment methods that use behaviorism and behavioristic techniques in order to get to basically condition children to behave a certain way, and to condition good behavior and condition out bad behavior, or unacceptable social behavior, for example. And so those are types of things that these principles are still being used today all the time to condition people into doing certain things. So when you have a moment, I encourage you to watch this video. It's fun. It's behaviorism is a worldview. Okay. The major criticisms with behaviorism is the fact that it's solely focused on objective, measurable behavior, that it completely ignores cognition. It ignores what you're thinking. It ignores what you're feeling. It completely disregards it. So, social psychologists are really interested in how you interpret the situation, not only how you behave, but also how you think and how you feel. So behaviorism by itself is not the best way to approach social psychology by itself. Okay. The problem with behaviorists is they think that cognition, thinking, and feeling are just too vague. They're hard to measure. Yeah, they're hard to measure, but it doesn't mean you ignore them. Okay. It also ignores the construal of the situation. So it ignores the fact that a person's interpreting a situation a certain way, again, rooted in what they're feeling and thinking in the moment, right? As a whole, as by itself, it is inadequate for understanding the social world. It's inadequate for understanding how a person is going to interpret a situation and be able to act beyond that. And it really overlooks that interpretation process because it discounts the feelings and the thinking part of the process. So behaviorism is great to look at the observable behavior that occurs in the environment and in response to the environment. But you need more. We need more of a methodology in order to understand social situations and social psychology. So another area that another sort of emphasis another perspective is called Gestalt psychology. Okay. And so understanding the interpretation of the situation and understanding that construal part of things really is rooted in Gestalt psychology. So this school of psychology is looking at how people view certain situations in pieces and together as a whole in their minds. Okay. So one thing that is done is interpreted incorrectly. So a lot of people say, oh, Gestalt psychology is, does anybody know this? It is the whole is something than the sum of its parts. Does anybody know what this is? Yes, greater. So some people put that in chat. So put in chat. Yes. So most people know this as the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But this is a misinterpretation of Kurt Kafka's statement. And the statement is actually the whole is other than the sum of its parts. Okay. So there's a very different meaning there. It's not that the sum is greater than its parts. It's that the whole is different than the sum of its parts. So think of it this way. We can look at a painting, right? And we can say, we can break it down to individual elements. We can look at the primary colors and the breakup of colors. We can look at the different brush strokes that were applied to the paint and to the colors onto the canvas. We can look at the different geometric shapes that they form. As we look at all of these pieces, okay, looking at all of these pieces together versus standing back and looking at the whole picture, these are two different things. The whole is going to influence your interpretation of the pieces and how they come together to fit a whole picture. Okay. So looking at the parts is not a way to look at the whole. It's a piece of it. It's not the only thing. So yes, something is made up of a bunch of stuff, but the something and the bunch of stuff are different and they come together for your interpretation of the whole picture. Does that make sense? So just by looking at the building blocks, just by looking at all the pieces. So if we were to look at all the broken down elements of a painting, okay, that is going to be different, but putting it all together is going to be different than standing back and just looking and appreciating the whole. And this is where social psychology is rooted, this idea. By looking at what the whole situation is doing and building that construal on the individual elements. Okay. So looking at what is important here. Okay. But also looking at the situation in context as a whole thing. Okay. So looking at the whole versus then breaking things down, two separate ideas, but you bring them together in order to fully understand the situation at hand. Does that make sense? This is important to distinguish that Gestalt psychology is really about looking at the whole picture, but also acknowledging that it's made up of parts, but looking at the forest for the trees, right? Does that make sense? So looking at the forest, notice acknowledging that the forest is made up of trees, and without the trees, there would be no forest. but the forest is very important to consider here. Okay. Now, where did this come from? Where did Gestalt psychology come from? It came from philosophers. It came rooted in philosophy, rooted in psychology in Germany. Okay. And so it came in the early 20th century. We have Kurt Kafka, Wolfgang Kohler, Max Wertheimer. These individuals were very influential in the area of Gestalt psychology, which then influenced social psychology. One major thing that impacted the thought process here was the fact that World War II was going on. This is, the Holocaust, the Nazi regime. This influenced a lot of the thoughts behind building this sort of field. Okay. And one particular individual, Kurt Lewin, was very influential in social psychology. Okay. In fact, we would call him the founding father of modern experimental social psychology. He was a young German Jewish professor in the 1930s and experienced Semitism, which was rampant in Nazi Germany. Okay. And so because there were so many people who were anti-Jewish, it really influenced his thinking. It shaped how he studied psychology. Okay. He applied these Gestalt principles to social perception. He was very interested in understanding prejudicial thinking, ethnic stereotyping, and really was able to pave the way on how we understood construals and how we understood certain social situations. Because remember, in this particular time, there were debates between people saying humans are just inherently bad people, and the people who are Nazis are just all bad people, and they're just, it's a sort of very pessimistic view of human nature, that given this situation that people will just be awful to other humans. Then there was a positive view of people that say, no, let's look at the situation. And a person might not be inherently bad, but they might be in a situation where they don't feel like they have a choice in the way that they behave because they feel threatened, or they're worried, or they're scared. And so this is a less pessimistic view on human nature, because it makes you think about how the person feels in the moment and how they're reacting to the social situation around them. Okay. So this is a really important aspect to understanding human behavior in times of great conflict and stress, in this example of, for example, Nazi Germany.